Thank you guys. I kind of get a kick out of the fact that I can just like make a flyer that says come to a place and you guys will all just come to a place. That's kind of ridiculous and amazing, but thank you for being here. It's like a lot of people from very different walks of my life, so it's really nice to have people together. Trevor's one of my besties. Dee is the owner of this space, and if anyone doesn't know Meadow, if anyone hasn't like taken the blood oath and sacrificed the blood, which we do.
I didn't get that.
It's part of no, that's when you get a subscription. But highly recommend this space and the other one. It's beautiful, and you are kind of the reason why this all started, because everyone here is a Meadow member, and this whole idea came from conversations with people in this space, and then realizing that these are like pretty good conversations and we should be having them more publicly. So thank you for that. I have some beat poetry people over here. That's kind of cool. I mean, it's kind of stand-up poetry. I don't know. It's a bunch of other friends, about people. So, and then my dad. It's Dana. He's the best. So what is there to talk about? There's tea and wine. The wine, I am a sommelier, so I feel like I should give like a little bit of spiel about the wines. There's two wines. I brought them because they're from a winery that I worked at in 2019. I, at the time, was leaving the wine industry, and I was kind of having a bit of a crisis, which you'll see as a theme in my life. And when I don't really know what I'm doing with my life, I tend to turn to, among other things, manual labor. So I worked at Harvest at this winery, which is just a bunch of really hard work. It's not really glamorous. It's incredibly difficult. But it bonded me with a few other people from that winery who have become really close friends of mine. And so it was kind of a special thing for me to bring in wines from this winery. And then one of them, I'm gonna grab it. So one of them is just a rosé, which is great. And then this one is, it's called a Piquette Nat. It's kind of an interesting wine. Piquette is a wine that is made from, it's a second pressing of pumice. So I'm just gonna give a brief spiel and then we'll get into like actual creativity and other people. But I just feel like I need to talk about it because it's kind of cool. So it's like a second pressing of essentially like the scraps of the wine that was first made. And you take the like pumice, the like leftovers, and you soak it in water, and then you put it through a fermentation a second time. This one was done a little bit in a little bit of a weird way. So that style is called Piquette. Yes.
Isn't that how they make Marmite from beer?
I have no idea how you make Marmite. But it's kind of like it was like how they made like peasant wine kind of in like France back in the day, and it feels kind of okay. So that's how they make that kind of wine. But then the winemaker, he decided that to like add some hibiscus into it as well, which is not generally done in wine and like fine wine at all. But the idea was okay, never mind. I can like get way too deep into the wine stuff, but I'm gonna try not to. But I like the idea because it felt very much like a genuine product of the environment. A really close friend of mine, Vince, designed this label, and it's designed out of like paper cuttings that he just like taped and then made this label. And he is the worker of the cellar there, and he's just a total like working class hero. And this is in Salinas, California, and the whole like story of like this wine, and then like adding hibiscus, which is like Jamaica, which is inspired by agua fresca, and then with this guy who is this incredible creative, but is just like a cellar worker. I love this story, and this to me is like the idea of just like working class creativity in action. So. In terms of its actual taste, it's just kind of interesting and weird. It's not like a fine wine, but it's fine. It's fine. So say a bit about what this whole event is, and then we'll talk to these great people. But okay, as most of you guys know, I wrote a little book about wine, and I released it like 2 months ago, and it was, I've always created stuff, but I've never released it into the world, and I've never like been kind of like a creative out loud, I guess. And then I found that I was working this corporate job, and I hated it so much, and it was kind of like my last attempt at trying to avoid my creativity, just because the idea of like being a writer is so incredibly inconvenient. Like it's just like so hard to try and make money doing that. So I was trying to avoid it by just like doing every other possible thing, and I just hated all of it. And I was working this corporate job, and I despised it, and I like crafted this plan pretty early on that I would just not work very hard and use my time to hi.
Hey everybody.
Help yourself to everything.
Thank you. I was like, do not perceive me.
What is, no, let's perceive her.
Say it again.
Well, what's your name?
Oh my god, Marcy.
Say hi, Marcy.
Dee will surely have set up the room so that I'm going to be able to slip.
Everyone say Marcy.
See right here. Marcy, tell us
But I will be recording everyone's testimonial about why they love Meadow at the end.
There you go.
Anyway, bottoms up, creative. Keep it going.
Get loose, folks. So anyway, I had this plan where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like build out my creativity, and then not work very hard, and just save as much money as I can until I get laid off. And that's exactly what happened. My plan came to fruition. So I got laid off, I got like a decent severance, and I was like, sweet, like now I have no choice but to do the thing that I know that I have to do, so whatever. So now I'm like trying to, I'm trying to piece together my life after that, which I'm just like very much leaning into the creative stuff. So like everything just has to be writing. So I came out with this guy, and I've always been like held back by just a million things, which we'll talk about, but I know that every creative would relate to. And perfectionism, of course, being one of them. And then with this, I had like a 3/4 done manuscript, and eventually I was just like, fuck it, let's just like do it. Yeah. Like just like finish it and just get it out. And because that was like the one thing that I hadn't done. So then I released this into the world, and then as soon as I like got it into a bunch of people's hands, I was like immediately just like flooded with this wave of being like kind of mortified, because it was the first time where I had like just given a bunch of people like a piece of my heart, but also like a piece of something that was like kind of my heart, but also kind of not my heart, because it was kind of rushed in some ways, and something is never going to be perfect. Even if it is great, it's always not going to be like quite a representation of exactly the vision that you had. So just like all of these things were just like, and I was like, holy shit. And then I started talking to people about it, and it turns out that everyone understood and related. And I remember having a conversation with Serena and Reeve, and I was
over there, right?
yeah, we were right, yeah, and it was right here, and I was like talking about this, and we ended up just not working for like an hour and just like chatting about this stuff, and it was so normalizing, and it kind of just like reminded me that like all of the things that I was doubting about myself are just like part of the process. It's just like part of being a creative. So you can snap out loud. Anyone can snap. If anyone wants to show support or admiration at any point, you're absolutely welcome to do that as loud as you want. You can also just like shout out random compliments to any of the 5 panelists. I thought a few would come of that, but
We went under it.
I didn't have enough wine yet. So anyway, yeah, I was just thinking that like these are the conversations that I want to be having, like out loud publicly have a community around it. That's the deal. So that's why you guys all ended up here.
Oh, thank you.
So you look terrified. So I have a topic, and we're gonna dive into that. They don't know what the topic is, and I was thinking we could talk about it a little bit, and then just open it up afterwards, and we can all talk about it. But before that, let's just go down the line. Can you guys introduce yourselves, and then just say what you're working on? Kind of what you do. I don't like that question, but like what you're working on, and then like what is something that you've been just like thinking about / struggling with recently.
So my name's Serena. I have a social media agency and I do influencer marketing. It's a lot of partnerships and talking to people, and I've always wanted a job where I could just make money talking to people. So I'm almost there, doing it like okay. I want to get to a stage where it's just talking to people, but I still have to do like a lot of the legwork and physical work myself, which I don't mind because it's quite like meditative. Yeah, I have a content brain, so I'm too analytical, and I'd say my struggle right now is just always thinking about content or looking at the situation and just be like, this would make great content. I'm so glad your dad's taking content right now. So yeah, and I wish I could be more present.
Why is that a struggle?
It takes over everything, especially if you have clients you're really passionate about and you want to keep like producing for them. So I used to do agency work for e-commerce brands, and it's like making a piece of content every single like SKU or like product on a website, and then just really kind of like almost losing yourself in it and wanting to like this 7 to 10 seconds be the best thing anyone's ever seen. Like it's yeah. So I kind of want to let it more loose. Like yeah, it's just a video. So yeah, that's me.
I'm Stephanie. I used to do costume, and before that, I had a career in theatrical marketing, so like promoting films for a studio. And now, I still do costume. As you can see, I have indigo fingers right now because I did a bat. But I have kind of stepped into producer role. I founded a production company a year ago, and I think it's what I'm struggling with right now is all that experience like on set, and now being, as opposed to being below the line, being above the line, and knowing how I'm going to be the most effective, but also really take care of the people that are in those departments.
And the difference for the non-film people between below the line and above?
Above the line is like writers, directors, producers, actors. And below the line is like every other department: cinematography, costume, electrical, production designers. That's it.
Hi, my name is Reef. I'm a musician, music producer. I also work as a software engineer. I've been doing music stuff for a while now, like over 10 years. Let's see, what am I struggling with? I guess like everything's always kind of in a mini crisis. So I'm compelled to almost say
people.
everything. But right now, I recently moved out here, so I'm like in the process of transitioning here, meeting new people. I guess, actually, and this doesn't even feel like a crisis, but like the thing that I'm kind of focused on right now is like meeting new artists out here, forming kind of like collaborative relationships, and I guess like seeing what ends up happening. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I'm Grant, also a software engineer. I feel like my whole life I've been like a math, science, like sort of person. In the last year or two, I've kind of come to appreciate more of the creative side of kind of that role. A lot of things that I do in life, and have thought some about how I kind of avoided creative things or kind of more ambiguous things in the past, and kind of like the math science kind of like software route. It's very structured, kind of how kind of safe I felt in that. So I'm kind of doing like a kind of a 180 on that in a lot of ways, and I'm transitioning from being really kind of a software engineer to trying to start my own company. So it's a lot of like ambiguity in that. Really, I feel like where I'm at is like the 0 to 1. Like, how do I go from like kind of anything to like this one thing, and how do I kind of like set myself up for that mentally to like not work, right? And how do I balance trying to do something that I really want to do that speaks to me, while also doing something that makes money, has a business model behind it, and like what, like that intersection is tricky.
So something that I like about like this selection of people is that I think that kind of classically the idea of like an artist or creative is like a pretty limited view. We have like a really limited view of that, and I think that needs to be wider. So I actually really like this story. My dad lived in Paris for a while when he was in his 20s, and he told me, so this is, you know, I'm trusting you with this, that there's a really different culture around art, like artistry and creatives there, and that there, if you worked at a cafe and you were a writer and you also wrote, then you were considered a writer. And here, if you work at a cafe and you write, you work in a cafe. And yeah, just like, and I kind of feel like that's changing a little bit.
That's what I was saying. Do you think that's changing?
I don't have my finger on the pulse of the world, but in terms of Highland Park, I feel like that's changing. Like, at least, like, I've been going to a lot of events around, like, just, like, Highland Park recently, just, like, Scribble down the street, if anyone knows that, you should know that. I don't know, North Fig Bookstore, there's a bunch of, like, just great places where there's just, like, really interesting, weird programming, and there's a lot of just, like, open conversations and just pop across the street. Tiny little bookstore that carries like almost entirely local made things. If anyone makes anything, go to Pop, they will carry it. And yeah, I kind of feel like at least like hyperlocally that is changing, and hopefully that'll spread out. But Serena like brings this amazing perspective where she's like a hustler. You are such a hustler. She's like, and she's like kind of an agency girl, so like she, like, I feel like you're always thinking about like the client, you know, and you're not so precious about like the thing that you're making. It's more just like about like delivering and get it out there and like get it done.
Yeah.
You're very practical like that.
Yeah.
And that's just such an important perspective to bring
I
into
mean,
the conversation.
so like for me, even coming to LA, I knew I was never gonna be like the talent, but I did always want to be like the connector or like the partnership person. And whenever I meet like podcast people, like I met this guy that does a survivalist podcast, and then he was like, oh yeah, do you know any partnerships? And I was like, you should reach out to this brand and this brand and this brand. And they're like, why, do you know them? And I was like, no, you just reach out. you just ask. Like, because if you don't ask,
you know how to
you don't
get shit done.
Well,
not all artists know how to get shit done. We're just like precious in our rooms crying. I'll speak for myself.
Like all like PR is, like if you ever get a publicist, all your publicist is doing is emailing people and outreaching to people, whether they know them or not. So that's all your publicist does. And you can do it yourself, but it's easier for someone else to do it because it's cringe if you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
So it's the same with social media as well. It's easier to like, hey,
Yeah.
can you repost this if it's someone's job to ask, rather than being like, hey, can you please like repost my music or repost my art. It's easier to like have a minion.
So support each other's shit.
yeah, just ask.
And then like Grant as another example, he's in software, and like you're thinking about like, I mean you can say it, but like it sounds like you're thinking about what you want to do next, but you very much want to stay in software. But the conversations that we had like the first time that we met were just like the same conversations that it's just about the same ideas of like how do I like consciously create, how do I like consciously move in the directions that are like gonna have create a life that will like support my dreams and my desires and my passions and all that stuff. So anyway, I kind of like that like broadening of the term.
And you're trying to make something from nothing,
Yeah.
which is what everybody I think in this room has done already. But yeah, it's the most exciting stage.
It doesn't always feel like that. I appreciate the perspective. It's
It
terrifying.
always feels like the scariest step,
Yeah.
like the decision to go on your own. Like I think the 5 of us can agree we all decided to go on our
Yeah.
own, and I think that is the scariest
Yeah.
thing to do.
Great. So now you can all give us a round of applause. All you have to do is ask. Okay, so the thing that I wanted to talk about was this idea of like, where's the line between perfectionism and delivering? So my idea with this is that as creatives, we have to be both the artist and the entrepreneur. This wasn't always the case, but it's definitely the case now. And so we want our work to be excellent. If we didn't, we wouldn't be working for ourselves and be doing our own stuff and making something out of nothing if we didn't want our work to be excellent. But then we also need to like get it done and get it out into the world and have it make money for us, and those things are all really different. So these are a lot of big questions, and I'll just ask them all and we'll just talk about them slowly. But what are the struggles and questions that come with this paradox? And then also, when do you know? You can go first.
I will.
And then also, like, when do you know that something is good enough that it can be considered done?
Who's first?
I'll go first.
Can you
Okay.
say it
So-
again louder, the question?
Oh, okay.
Ask that. I'm gonna get more wine.
Okay. So, can you give me some too?
Yeah.
Either one. So what is the line between perfectionism and delivering, between wanting to make something that is excellent and then that like adheres to your vision, and then also knowing that it's something that you just have to you have to get it done and you have to get it out there, and you have to kind of make it work for you. So what are the paradoxes that come with that? Thanks. And like the questions and the struggles that come with that. And then also when can a work be considered done and ready?
Okay, I can go first. So, in film, specifically in costume, obviously you're working collaboratively. So as a costume designer, it's the things you have to, the first thing you have to realize is the vision that you have, even your illustrations, it's never gonna be 100%, because there's always compromise, there's always a director, there's always money involved that comes before any vision that you may have. And so learning that early on was really great. It's the same in all the departments. Everyone has to compromise. You have to be meticulous with your communication and attention to detail, and you just have to be wide awake and open at every single moment, because there's so much at stake, not to mention the actors. But with costume, it's like you're dressing someone. So it's not just one moment where you come to realize this choice. It's like if there's a dress, let's say I'm dressing Emma Roberts, which has happened. It's like her people, the director. I have to bring in 10 people into a room and make sure everyone's okay with it. So it's just always going through that process has always been daunting, because you just never know how people are going to react. And even based on facial expressions, like you don't know if it's good or not. And so it's like you have to walk through the fire, come out on the other side, and then sit down and have these conversations with people. And sometimes they'll be nice to your face and lie, and then you hear about it later and they're like, yeah, we're scrapping that whole idea, going a different direction. So it's like going back. So I think it's really being amenable, excellent with communication, knowing that you're going to compromise no matter what, but being open to that compromise, and just being able to not sleep. That goes a long way.
So I realized we met up a week ago and talked, and I realized at that I think you kind of stand out in a way where, like when the way that the creative things that I've done, it's kind of been my sole vision.
Mm-hmm.
And you're working on a project where there's 200 people and they're working with a shared vision. So
Yes.
how does that work? Like does everyone bring their own mini vision, or do you like calibrate on one together? Is there a trickle down vision effect?
The thing is, there's typically should be 2 meetings that take place where the heads of the departments meet over Zoom. A lot of it was during COVID. And so you meet everyone, and everyone kind of brings forth their vision and shows like their little portfolio vision of whatever their department's doing. Production design shows costumes, so we make sure clashing colors, because that's the whole thing. So there's all the elements. You need to tick all the boxes, make sure every department has communicated with each other. There's a recognition of this is who you're going to be working with, so everyone's in line and understands. But what I find over and over on set that I've seen that people do is you don't have time to get to know someone. So you need to come in with a shorthand. And that shorthand usually typically is like a book. You recommend a book, or you buy someone a book that you want to befriend because your work depends on it. Or music, or some other form of art that becomes a shorthand of connectivity between the 2 or 3 or the 20 of you. And that's a way where it's like you immediately build kind of like this intimacy, and then everyone's guard comes down and you're able to kind of bring forth this magic in 4 or 5 weeks.
Vibe check.
But it has to be like immediate, and everyone has to be on board, like to be disarmed in that way for it to work. Otherwise there's friction.
So it sounds like the shorthand is both a way of like disarming people and also establishing like a shared vocabulary, shared way of referring to things.
Disarming, but like being authentic in that, right? Like I think especially when it comes to costume, like from that angle, there's always been this idea of like, oh, go talk to the wardrobe girls, and it's like it'll be like the production designer or some other creative, and if there's a disconnect, it's like, how can I communicate this so that they understand the vision, or what can I share immediately, whether it's music or references, so that they understand in that short term.
Is there a competition aspect to it where like you have multiple people competing to design a costume for somebody within the context of one film?
No. So it's kind of like a bid, imagine. So what happens is there'll be a movie, and a director, let's say if they've worked with an established costume designer, they'll want to work with them again, or if they're in a different country, they'll kind of ask the producer to reach out to a couple people, and then depending on who decides to essentially bid for that job or put something together, you have to basically put together like a lookbook of what you would do to main characters for the film, like what kind of illustrations, references, create a booklet essentially of saying like this is how I would distill the characters and present that, and then see if that carries through, and if it does, then you get hired, bring on your team. It's a miracle that anything gets made.
Directors have to bid as well to even get the movie from the producers. So they'll ask like a slew of directors, and they have like 3 days to give a treatment to the producers. And then if the director wins, then it just chain reaction.
All of that is kind of vision aligning.
So it's not. That's the problem I had going into it, because I'm a Capricorn rising Taurus. When I was like, hey, wait, this isn't gonna be my thing? What do you mean? It was like I have to share and then hear other people.
Yeah.
But I learned quick.
I think in a group it will get shipped regardless of whether you think it's finished or not, right?
Oh, so for the delivery portion, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like so many times they end up cutting scenes, and it's like you think you have a 5-day week, and then you have a 3-day week, and then there's costumes that aren't even used, and it's like whatever it is, it ends up being a representation of you. And obviously in your mind you have the 20 things that you weren't contractually obligated to do that you did anyway, or things that they cut out, or things that they added, and it still doesn't end up being, like, even, I was thinking about this the other day with Beyonce's movie. I was like, it's a masterpiece, it's beautiful, it's great that it exists, but I'm sure it wasn't, like, the final product in her mind either, because it just never is. It never is. There's too many people involved, timelines change, everything. And so it's, that's why people that work in my industry, it's like the moment you just congratulate one another at the fact that you're doing what you're doing for a living, especially because we're in a contraction period right now, and I don't know where we're headed with that, but it's like the fact that anything gets made is a miracle, even if it's shit.
That reminds us of something that we talked about once, which is like as you're working on something, like if you're working on something that is close to your heart, for me at least, like the process of working on it changes me, such that by the time that it's done, my vision isn't relevant anymore because I'm different. So there's like, it's like always, I very much believe that, like, I don't know, I kind of have a kind of like ennui, nihilistic view of things in general, but like I kind of feel like creativity, like art is always measured in like degrees of failure. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's like the failure to represent a certain vision. I do think that like as you're creating something, then like other things come in, like it becomes different, like your vision evolves. And so that the end product is probably not going to be exactly what you imagined, and that's maybe for the best, probably for the best. Ideally, like it becomes something bigger or different.
Yeah, and like when you say degrees of failure, you're referring to like the distance between what you
platonic
delivered
ideal
and like platonic ideal
and reality.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does platonic ideal mean?
Oh, it's like
for
Plato.
those of us that don't know.
Oh, okay. So like Plato.
Yeah.
I've
heard of that
guy. Had this idea. Was it okay? I kind of mix up Plato and Aristotle. You can maybe help me. I feel like you probably know this stuff, but like Plato's cave is this. Like philosophical idea that's like there are these people in a cave and they're like looking at shadows on a wall that are like playing out on a wall, and they think that that's reality, but that's like just kind of like the shadow of the like true reality, and the true reality is this like idea that's in the sky, and but we're all living in this like mortal world that is kind of just like a shadow game, you know. So the platonic ideal is like that like sacred vision that you have of the thing, you know? And then you like try and like make it out of like rocks and stones, and you're just like,
I think that's
you know?
Yes, I feel that.
Yes, you feel
I think that's that's so beautiful, like to put it out and think of it that way. I never feel that way. No, because I have to be so practical. And
oh wow, what's that like?
I've been talking about it.
You also have to fight for your work here in LA. You have to, so I remember one conversation I had with you, I was like, double down on your vision, double down.
Yeah.
If anyone else tries to talk you out of your vision, or like, oh no, maybe we can change this, maybe we can change this. It is like too many chefs in the kitchen, so like refuse and double down, especially if it's for yourself and it's not like a 200-person team, and it is just like, just double down on your vision. So that's my advice.
Hearing both of you share your perspectives is very interesting to me. It sounds like in the context that you operate in, like delivery is defined. Like, and then framing this in the context of the larger question, like delivery is a given. Like,
Yeah, well, not always, but yeah, let's
like,
assume.
I guess I'm assuming there's like deadlines, things are moving, there's a lot of people,
There's-
like everybody's like expected to execute
Yes.
and like deliver it.
Yeah, there's,
Um,
there's principal there's like pre-production, production, and then post-production, and then the delivery date for the film to go to festivals, or if you're doing a TV show, like if you're doing a pilot, there's just like so many things. But let's talk about like a film, for example.
Yeah.
There's those 3 stages, and then it'll do festival circuit, or maybe go straight to streamer because they had a deal in place for that licensing window immediately, because maybe it wasn't good enough to do a festival, and like they know it's not going to get any acclaim or awards. Those laurels are important. If you're not going to get them, may as well just go straight to a Netflix or Amazon Prime. But yes, generally there's always a delivery set date for the film to be cut. Once it enters post-production, you can get anywhere between 6 to 10 weeks, sometimes longer, depending on the budget. That's the thing. It always just depends on the money and people involved.
That's
People get
different.
sick. I just had to deal with that. We shot a documentary last summer, and our editor, his house flooded. He went away for a couple of days, house completely flooded, and then I talked to my business partner about it, and we're like, let's just stay with this guy. Like, he has a great vision. He's gonna do right by us. Like, we're doing this together with him. And so now here we are 7 months later. We're starting in 2 weeks finally. But
Well, and then to also try and to frame this back into the original question, like perfection would be, like there's a constraint that's baked into the definition of perfection. Like perfection has to be achieved within these given constraints of delivery. Where if, like, in the context of somebody who's responsible for responsible more or less for both, like you have the ability to define perfection as the platonic ideal, and that's a choice that you get to make. And you could stop there, right? Like I could do that for myself right now. Like I define like perfection as the platonic ideal, which I just learned about, of like a certain sound, I guess. And then I'm done. Like, round of applause? No. But then you also have taken the additional step of committing to certain deliveries.
Yeah.
One more, and like if you only run it once, like if you only run like one iteration of it, you define perfection and deliver. The delivery will be somewhere like close, or it'll be some distance from that platonic ideal, and hopefully you get another chance. And I guess like to me they're both not static. Like perfection is always changing and delivery is always changing. So I guess that's my attempt to answer, like, get at that one.
And I just wanted to comment on what you were actually talking about in the original conversation, where you were like, I don't think this represents me anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that it doesn't, just because you don't feel that way in that moment, doesn't mean that what you made previously isn't still valid, or isn't still like a creation that has already been put out there. But I was even looking at something I made today, and I just like had to stop watching it, and I said like done is better than perfect in an agency setting.
Yeah.
Because you just get it out.
Yeah. I think in a non-agency setting too, there's this idea. Do you guys know Elizabeth Gilbert, author, whatever?
Eat, Pray, Love.
She wrote Eat, Pray, Love. Yeah, I kind of feel like that almost like demotes her. I mean, no, it's a great book. It's a great work of art. Bye, Zach. mean, I feel like that book, it was just kind of like big New York Times bestseller kind of thing, and it's great. But anyway, whatever. She's like a very important voice in the like conversations about creativity and conscious living and all that stuff. And she had this idea that I like really resonated with, which is the idea that like you can get like creatively constipated, and that you need to just like creativity is kind of just like it's kind of just like pooping, and like you need to just like sometimes you have an idea and you need to just like get it out, even if it's like not great. You just need to get it out so that like the conduit can like move, and I feel that all the time. Like I've always like have ideas, but like if an idea is stuck in my head for 8 years, then it's like clogging up my shit, you know? And like you just need to like get it out, even if it's like
What helps you get it out?
not we can talk about that later. Fiber, like that's a whole
Just a creative fiber.
creative fiber. But yeah, I don't know, like
Wine.
maybe even if like maybe that's like not the perfectionism conversation, but I do think that like it's necessary sometimes just to like get something out there, just to like keep the avenue flowing.
Did you talk about creative fiber?
Creative fiber.
What's an example of creative fiber for you?
For me, I don't know what. I think just like doing it sometimes, just
Yeah,
like brute
just the act of
forcing
doing
myself
it,
to
yeah.
actually just do it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Instead of just like.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you have any creative fiber?
I don't know about all of you, but as a writer, I find that I'm working for 100 different people, but they're all up here. So if I don't necessarily turn in something on time or the way someone wants me to write it, I'm going to hear about it. And I have to reiterate certain things over and over again until I get them right, not necessarily for myself, but for whoever I'm writing for, if that makes sense. And sometimes it's not me that I'm writing for.
Okay.
'Cause
Even
I'll
though the
sit-
standards are up here.
Right.
Okay.
I'll sit down and I'll start writing something, but I'll have absolutely no idea as to what's going to come out on the page. And then whether it comes out the way I'm hoping it would, or whether it's something that I can, let's say, pass along and move on to the next thing, it usually, it just comes about like that. Like I have to, there's just the act of doing it, which makes it, whatever I'm working on after that, more creative. It gives me the ability
Yeah.
to be more creative
Right.
because I'm,
Creating begets creating.
right.
Mm.
So it's almost like I'm
Yeah.
bashing the creativity with more creativity.
Yeah. Fire with fire.
Yeah, totally.
Cool.
Indeed.
Yeah, I like that because I think and I'm curious what you all think of this, because like I think one of the things I've been struggling with in this process is like how vision driven to be. I think, right? Like I think it's really easy for me in this process of like whatever, like the idea maze, right? Like how do you like run through this and figure out like what to do? It's easy for me to like have ideas in my head of like this vision, right? But again, going back to what I said earlier with the business, or if art is your business, right? Like people need to pay you, right? Like there's some reality of this, and I think it's really easy for me to get this idea of a vision in my head that doesn't really align with what people actually are interested in and they want. So I think I struggle with that a lot because it's really easy to build up a vision in my head. Like that part I can do, like go to bed, right? That's like the easiest part. But I really struggle with, I think, the flip, which is like, okay, let me go like bottoms up and let me just like start and not kind of be attached to some end state and kind of start exploring and just kind of see what comes of it. But again, going back to the math, science like guy, that's very difficult, right? That's because like it feels much safer for me to have a vision and be like, oh, I know what I'm doing, right? This is my vision, this is where I'm going, than it is to be like, I don't know, I'm gonna kind of just like run with it and see. So I feel like I'm trying to like balance that. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts or whatever. But it's like it's very unnatural for me.
You're in the abstract. Like the whole point of being creative, I think, is like you never know. You really don't. You can't see the outcome. And I think that's one of the hardest things to go through because you're like living through it. Like I'm sure if you can share like what your writing process was like with the book, that'd be great because I'm sure I can relate to that with like I'm wrangling my writer director right now to like finish that damn script in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Glad she's not here. But it's like, it's like, imagine a person going at you and being like,
Yeah.
we need to shape the story.
And that's totally different than, like, with my experience with this is something that I was doing alongside working a job, so I didn't have, like, those deadlines or anything like that. It was something that I could be precious about, because it wasn't something that, like, I didn't have, like, an editor who was like, we need that draft, So that totally changes it. But yeah, with this, like, it was completely different than what I expected. Like, I went in, I don't know, I had a completely different idea, and then I was like, oh shit, this is way too broad of a topic. I could fill way too much, and this is, like, it's just too much. So as I started writing, I think a lot of this, it's kind of funny because, like, the book is, like, kind of about wine, but it's, like, not about wine. It's very much about, like, other things.
So much more.
Yeah, it's very much about just, like, philosophy.
I haven't read it yet. Don't give it away.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna read it.
But I think that was kind of, like, partially, like, my creative constipation. It's, like, that's, like, the things that I've been, like, chewing on and thinking about for so long that, like, when I had an outlet, I think it was just, like, that's, like, what it became. And then I was like, well, I guess this is what we have, so, like, let's just run with it. So, yeah, that, forget your question, but I hope I answered it.
Sure.
I want to touch on what Grant said about, like, what people want. And being a child of the internet, there is a very small chance you'll be able to predict what people want. No one knows what people want until they see it. So there's, like, this Venn diagram
Double down.
of
Serena's
literally,
double down.
like what you want to make versus what people want, and there's a sweet spot in the middle. And like, yeah, there is no algorithm that can tell you what people want. And, like, I think of some of these huge internet successes, like Exploding Cats, or, like, Cards of Humanity, or She's a 10, but all these, like, crazy, like, people that just experimented, made stuff, and they're like, oh my god, I can make this into a game, and then it just exploded. There was no predicting that people would like that until it got out there, and then they were like, oh, this is really popular, and that's most of the internet, is just, like, experimenting.
I kind of feel like the actual disparity is not, or the actual, like, spectrum paradox or whatever, is not between, like, being a technical person and being a creative person, but it's more like being, like, a top-down person versus a bottom-up person. Because I think you can also, like, do like, whatever, writing or something in a way that's very much like, I have a specific vision and I'm, like, gonna make a plan and I'm gonna execute towards this goal. And that's one style. And then the other style is just that you, like, sit down and you just, like, vibe it out, And I feel like that very much applies to that too. So are you like more of the, like?
I'm, like, trying to, like, flip that, right?
Yeah.
I've always been like, like, software engineering, right? I mean, software engineering is very, like, okay, here are, like, the requirements, here's, like, how we're gonna build it, and, like, boom, 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 right? I mean, that's kind of like how you build software at most companies. It's like, again, it's very much like math, right? Here's a problem, here are the steps, here's how it's like pattern matching too, right? Okay, here's how you solve this type of problem, I'm gonna apply these steps, and I'm gonna go through it, right? And it works for that stuff, right? But it is also not super creative, right? You kind of, like, your outcome is, like, pretty narrow. So I think that I'm really trying to, like, flip that and get a little more comfortable with the opposite approach.
Okay, Beth is bursting.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm Beth.
That's what you got.
I do think there's a lot of beauty in your brain, though. And, like, maybe,
Very nice
but I mean, there's, like, it's not bad that you're just not, like, in this, like, head space. It's like, what do I do today? But, there are a lot of creatives are, like, I think you very obviously have this brain that's, like, skilled in a certain way, and, like, that's your power. So I wouldn't, like, try to suppress that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I think, like, everything like, when you're talking to me about it, like, I suck at math. And so anytime I think, like, when you're expressing all of these things, I start to think about how it's so hard to change. Like, you're basically talking about changing also, like, on a fundamental level, because you went from doing that and you may continue to be a software engineer, but, like, in a different way. And so you're setting your own standards, you're setting your own routine, you're setting your own, Can we talk about routine too?
Yes, we can.
Because I think that's important
Yeah.
for people to
Yeah.
just understand. Like, I want to know what your routine as a writer, what was that like? Were you like, did you light a bunch of candles, and like, what was your process?
Rituals.
Your ritual process. Like, what does that look like?
Well, I think because I've often written after a job,
Mhm.
I've often had like evenings,
Mhm.
and I've often like gone to a bar and gotten a cocktail and written for a few hours. So
At the bar or at
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah, and it's kind of like a
How do you do that? How do you avoid like talking to strangers?
oh, I'm good at that.
Oh.
That's one thing I'm good at. Just yeah, just complete disinterest. Yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, just like getting into the zone. Yeah, but I've actually always found that alcohol helps. I remember like being in college and I would like have a paper and I'd always wait till the day before.
Just like writers, man.
I remember like waiting until the day before because I was like so bored, honestly, that I just like wanted to give myself a challenge, and I like get a bottle of wine and just be like, and then I don't know, like sometimes I think that's like I have just like way too many thoughts happening, so I think I just like get in my own way. I think that's my thing, is like I get in my own way. So then I think there's something about like alcohol that just like it kind of just like it lessens the voices. Like you get fewer voices. There are a few that it just kind of like knocks out. And you're like, ah. So I think there are other ways to do that too. But
Okay, I'm kind of bursting.
Yeah.
On delivery, on the question that you were asking about knowing when to deliver, Grant sort of addressed this, but have you thought about when you know that you're done? Like, you're like, okay, this is the idea we're going with, this is what we're moving forward with. Like, have you thought about like what that moment is going to be and how you're going to know that it's that? Because you're talking about this conflict between vision and, I mean, like the market, like people wanting it. And like, have you thought about like that moment where you're just going to be like, okay, this is it. We're betting it all on this and we're moving forward with this.
yeah.
Not entirely. I think, and I'm curious from your thoughts. I think my approach has been, again, trying to approach it in a more iterative way, right? Trying not to feel, and part of this is context, right? This is bias. I feel like the companies I've worked at before have been burned by this, like, this is the idea we're running with, we're gonna make it happen. And then like 18 months and like $2 million have been burned, and you're like, I don't think that was it, right? So I mean, maybe that's the right approach. I don't know. But I feel like I'm trying to see kind of where the pull is. I think that I've had a few experiences at the end of this last company where I felt more of that excitement. It's like, oh, like this is something people want, right? I think for me, that's what I'm trying to get to, right? It's like, here's something where like, I try to think in orders of magnitude too. There's the analytical side. It's like, okay, let me find like 5 people, right? If I can find 5 people who are like, yeah, like, I'll pay you to build this, or like, if you build this, like, I'll pay you, or whatever it is. I'm like, okay, like 5 people. And then it's like, okay, can I find 10 people, right? If I can find 10 people, then it's like, can I find 100 people to do this? And try to really think in like those orders of magnitude and evaluate along the way, right? If I can get 10 people, but I spend 6 months and I can't get 100 people, or a year and I can't get 100 people, then it's like, well, I don't know, something isn't working. So I don't know, again, if that's the right approach, I have no idea. But that's how I've been trying to structure with myself, is like think in orders of magnitude and just start with, again, like 5 people, right? 5 people who have this problem, 5 people who are like this person.
Okay, the way that my brain like translates that is like, okay, there's too many thoughts, so, and tell me if this is not right for you, but like there's too many thoughts, so you just create arbitrary structure that says yes or no. Like green light or red light.
Yeah.
It's like somewhat, like I think the structures that we create are like based in some amount of like viability, but I think they're also kind of arbitrary in just like what we choose to be like the stop signs and the go signs. But if you just make a rule book for yourself and you're like, this means green light, this means red light, go, run that program, then like you're gonna come up with something.
That's my hope.
And like, the goal is something.
Yeah, and I think I very much operate in structures. I really try. I'm like really trying. I feel like the phase I'm in right now is like trying to put those sorts of systems in place in a way that allows me to make progress while not being restrictive.
Yeah.
Right. So like have structure, but not have that structure be like this is the one idea that like I have this vision of the world and it's like going to happen.
Yeah.
Be like, nope, I'm gonna like, let me pick 2 problems, try to find 10 people to talk to, throw up some landing pages for 2 weeks, spend a week, reevaluate, see where I'm at. That's kind of like, again, how I process. Like that's kind of like
Sounds like
how
a
I
research
work.
paper to me. I'm like,
Can I
it's
share
different.
something?
It's different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, am I allowed to share?
You, yes.
Okay.
All these other schmucks now.
No, this has been awesome. I'm also bursting. Have any of you heard of the artist Jacob Collier?
Yes.
He did a really cool podcast episode recently that's been really sitting with me, and it feels like it's really related to what you are talking about in terms of like perfectionism and when you know something's ready. He talks about how when he first started in YouTube like 10 years ago, he got really caught up in thinking he had to contribute something to YouTube, meaning like add immediate value. And the mind shift for him was like, I'm gonna participate. And through my participation, I will find my voice and what is adding value to this space. And that allowed him to like be less precious about what he was adding to YouTube. And so like through that experience, ultimately kind of found his niche and then began to like actively contribute to the space. And I thought that was so powerful because it was like,
Absolutely.
thanks Jacob Collier. It feels related to what you all are talking about because I think, you know, Ariana, you just wrote a book, and I think it probably a lot of moments you were like, is this adding anything? Is this contributing? And yes, it is. I've read it and it has so many wonderful ideas, but it's also you participating in the space. It's you being like, let me put something out there and get reactions to see how people are responding to this and what's adding value and what's not adding value and how I can refine my ideas to create more value. I feel like in your process, you're like, in the participation phase, you're going, let me just start creating things and I will find through the process where I can make the greatest contribution or add the most value, which will then shape my vision. But it's like too soon in the participation phase to have clarity around what that vision is what I've been kind of hearing.
That feels very accurate, yeah.
Yeah.
Well said.
I'm curious if that applies to any of you other folks on the panel, like how the participation versus contribution. I'm also wondering if that's like the same version of the question of like perfectionism versus.
I like that because I feel like it frames it a little, like it decenters self and it centers like the like ongoing conversation that is happening around that canon or that topic, which I like a lot because it like, well, okay, never mind.
What it doesn't acknowledge are the stakes that creatives feel, which are like.
With that we feel. I think
Yeah,
that's
like,
the thing though. It's like
okay,
we feel
cool,
them,
I'm
but it's
participating,
not.
but like participating doesn't make me money. Participating
Yeah.
doesn't like get me what I need to be able to move forward, or.
I think it might just as much. I think
What is that
partic-
timeline?
And yeah, how long do you participate before you're? Yeah, I don't.
Like
I,
what you said made me want to participate, but I'm like, what would I participate with? Like, so like, there's the need and the one there, but then there's all the like what am I bringing?
So
What am I bringing to the table?
well,
But it was a really
participation would be success. I participated. That's success versus like what I gave made a difference or contributed something. Like that's a totally different version of success. So.
Well, it's also, I think, I interpret that differently in that participation is connected to, I didn't give your name, rituals and habits.
Oh, me,
Yeah.
Stephanie.
In terms of being able to look at participation as like, what is the actual, and I think about this a lot in the context of like the distinctions between discipline and motivation. Like discipline shows up when motivation fails you. And discipline is all about how do you build up the habits and rituals, which speak to the micro moments of the decisions we're making right now around the commitments and the participation in how we show up. So like the vision itself, I think in my opinion, matters less. than like how we're showing up presently, which then is going to articulate and illuminate the roadmap to what that vision is and what that bigger contribution is. Which is why I think so much about like habits and rituals. You know, in terms of like habits and rituals are the building blocks of discipline, and that discipline is then what's going to help unlock that creative kind of, I don't know, constipation and help it. But it's something that I think I reflect on a lot also, just because I don't know, when we think about like value, happiness, and fulfillment, and these bigger things that like life, that we're all aspiring for in life, for me at least, I derive that value from like what are the habits and the practices, the rituals that I'm just committing myself to right now. Everything else is going to figure itself out. You know, I may end up somewhere where it's like I'm happy, I'm not, and that's fine. You know, but I think oftentimes for me at least, what has paralyzed me in terms of like that perfectionism is just being able to like commit to doing something. Just putting it out there. You know?
Snaps for
Real, Appreciate you.
I'm thinking a little bit about like that concept of the regularity and the fear that might, like even if you have discipline, the fear that might prevent you from releasing something. And I'm like thinking about the constipation. Do you ever like have your own version of Metamucil? Do you ever like intentionally release something bland or bad just to get something out? Like,
And I think that's the idea of like
not like
morning
trying to be
pages.
good enough, but like intentionally bad.
That's good.
Yeah, I don't know.
I like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
We should do that. I love that.
Just unhinged programming. Let's just make something really bad.
Some weird shit.
Let's
Sounds
make
like an
something weird
amazing
and
plan.
bad that people don't want.
Yeah.
That's easier. Let's make something people don't want.
Yes.
Oh, I've long listed ideas people don't want.
I love that.
Okay,
I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Like I actually have
See how
that
much
written.
we want to hear?
I have that written. I have like phone notes where I just like keep my life organized, and it doesn't work. But anyway, like your idea of unhinged has like rocked my world. And one of my like motivational like sayings to one of my like, what is it called when you like say something
Like
to yourself?
mantra.
One of my like
Affirmation.
affirmations that I have is stay unhinged, and I think that's like so necessary. Because
Mine
it's
is
so easy to like get
stay
just like quashed.
Stay
delusional.
delusional. Stay delusional.
Totally.
I have to.
You have to. Yes.
I wanted to touch on what Alex said. So there is a really famous painter, Rothko, and he got commissioned to do this huge hotel in New York. And he was quoted saying that because he did not want the job, he didn't want to do the paintings. So he was quoted saying that he wanted to make paintings that would make all the businessmen sick at the dinner table. So they were like these maroon and like yellow and like really they're like disgusting colors. It was disgusting. But each of the paintings are like $15 million for the hotel. So like even that's like the artist intentionally making something so bad that he wanted people to throw up, but people still perceived it as like, oh my god, it's a Rothko. And, like,
That's a whole other conversation.
yeah, but that was the
That's
first thing
good.
I thought of when it's like artists intentionally making something bad, but it still came out good. You're like, maybe.
You have to be okay to fail so you can learn something.
Yeah.
And touching on habits as well and rituals. So I'm a psycho person that I try and look at like habits of business people and like unsuccessful people a lot. And then eventually I realized that all of like the social media habit things are completely just made up and not true, because one of the biggest habits of very successful people is gambling and gambling on themselves. It really is. It really is. Gambling, no, seriously. Even investors, if you know like a lot of really good investors, they're taking a gamble giving you money. Like it's a huge, like, I don't know, it's a thing. Like, and meeting a lot of different really successful people and a lot of different investors, they're just really good at like gambling. So yeah, there's like some like bad habits that people don't talk about. Like
A lot.
Do you think of gambling and like taking risks as more or less the same thing?
I think that successful people are very like risk adverse, and they like understand the like losses and things like that. They'll take a calculated like look at all the risks, and they'll be like, okay, it wouldn't be that bad if I lose out like 15 grand on this on this investment, and it could like double, it could triple or whatever. Like they look at things differently. And like even so, like for influencer marketing, there's like a whole sheet of influencers, and you literally pick and gamble which ones that you think will bring you the most money. Like, yeah, it's like just a different form of gambling. I don't know. That's kind of like, I guess that's a struggle I've been having recently as well. Of like, this is all just gambling.
Yeah.
The stock market's just gambling. I don't know.
Can I say something to your question or thought? I think it's also all about conserving your creative energy as well. Like, for example, I used to work on this, I was the art director for this team that sold almond milk, and I don't give a shit about almond milk anymore. But, I don't know, sorry. It's great. But what I mean is, like, it's not, this design isn't going to save the world. And so, if this layout isn't perfect, but it sells the product, then like I'm gonna put it out there in the world, and I'm not gonna make the team like spend hours pixel perfect on this on my book. But if it's something that's like part of my like creative heart, then I would spend that creative energy on that. So to me, it's all about conserving your energy. Like when I release this, it's not perfect, but it doesn't really matter, you know. Sorry to shit on almond milk. Exhausted.
I want to add something to just a wider theme here that I feel like no one, like, it's the elephant in the room, which is like, why are we perfectionists about our work? And what is the fear underneath that? Part of my work in deconstructing my own perfectionism has been like getting to like the core. It's like, is it perfectionism or is it a deep fear of rejection, of being misunderstood, of people not thinking I'm smart or that I know what I'm doing, and just rejection at its core, right? And then not belonging. So then you just take it all the way back to evolution, where we're just trying to secure a sense of safety and find where we belong. You know, like that's really what we're talking about here, and then it just, you know, like manifests in all these different areas. And so for me, kind of like the best way I can summarize like how I protected myself from that, because you know that's a lot of inner work. There's a lot of ways you can address that. Therapy is great. Somatic work is great. You know, inner childhood stuff is great. But like in the meantime, because I think that it's sort of like a lifetime of work to do in a way, like setting up parameters, like realizing like this is, if I know I'm prone to beating myself up in the process, this is the boundary of how far I'm going to go into that spiral. And one of the most helpful things that someone told me one time when I used to be like a huge workaholic, just like completely obsessed about getting like something like just right because I was afraid of people criticizing the work. And they were like, do you want to be an A+ photographer or do you want to be like a B? A+ photographers don't get sleep. They don't have time for their friends. They don't feed themselves well. And they're just not very happy with the process. And so what do you want? And so like when I find myself getting like really stuck, I kind of have the alarm goes off in my head. It's like ding, 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 ding. You start to feel like shit. Something's wrong here. So it's probably done. And also, that's how I know when something's done, actually. It's like if I'm starting to really feel like shit about it, I'm like, oh, you're going in circles. And then the other thing is like, oh shit, did I just lose it? I don't know, I have so much to say about this topic, but I'll wrap it up. Yeah, I feel like the extent to which I'm beating myself up is usually a pretty good indicator. And I'm like, oh, you're not enjoying yourself anymore. I do love that phrase, like, done is better than perfect. But it's like, well, I want it to be perfect because I don't want anyone to have anything bad to say about this. But I'm like, this isn't going to be for everyone. This isn't going to be for everyone.
I think I'm really glad you brought it to that, because I was thinking that too, that like perfectionism can be a beautiful thing in that it can be about protecting your vision, which is a great thing. You should protect your vision. But I think sometimes it's about protecting your vision, and sometimes it's about protecting yourself from exposure. And I think that line between when it crosses over into the other thing, like that's just, we all have to like go deep in ourselves to figure out that one.
And I do think a really helpful exercise is like, putting out a bunch of shit, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I saw this one coach talking about, they called it like the garbage trash challenge. And for all their clients, they were just like, this is just an example for social media. They're like, you're gonna post something every single day, even if it's shitty. Just like get used to just like putting stuff out there and get kind of like the wheels greased, if you will, like unclogged. And you start to detach from the outcome.
Yeah.
You start to detach because you're like, the stakes aren't so high and not everything has to be here.
You know, on that note, like, this whole conversation of perfectionism is kind of interesting to me. I don't know if I believe in perfectionism. For me, the definition of suffering is the attachment to things and notions. And when I've practiced that in my life, the attachment to things and notions, I've not been happy. And when I finally realized that that was the root cause of suffering for myself, and I see it in others, just that letting go of that attachment, like you were saying, attachment to perfection, attachment to things, whether you want money, a car, a job, attachment to a notion. When I'm 20, I should be here. When I'm 30, I should be here. I was supposed to do this by now. When we let that go and just flow and become more flexible, it's okay to make plans. I was talking to Dee about this. It's okay to make plans, just be flexible about them. So if you're planning and you're rigid, and to me perfectionism is a rigidness, and I don't think, in my lifetime, I have never found happiness within a rigidness. Like it just didn't exist because you're closing off to the vastness of everything, and that's really what's going to feed you in your creativity and like for your ideas and all. You know, you're kind of in this, you have some rigidness around that maybe you have to just let go a little. You know, maybe you don't have to, you know, just let it go.
See, I can relate to what you're saying because I work with like dozens of people at any given time, and so it's like I have to constantly remove myself and know that it's not about me and it's about everyone else and like the thing. And so, and even having a different relation with your work, like even after you produce it and it's out in the world, it's like there are some credits I'm ashamed of, there's some credits I won't stop talking about. And so it's like interesting to hear everyone's perspective on what is your relationship to your work, like within, let's say you do something for an influencer and then in 2 years down the line you look at it again, like do you cringe or do you have a different, or do you see it? Yeah.
Of course. Also, like I have to tell clients it's social media, so it's like it's disposable. Like today's news is tomorrow's newspaper or whatever the freaking saying is. It's some British fish and chips thing. But it's social media is disposable, so I love what Joy said about like if you just crank something out every day, like it really doesn't have to be super high quality because it is just like things are being uploaded every hour, like millions of videos, and like it's experimenting, it's getting used to that format, and just you don't need to be precious with it. So it's easier for social media because it's social media, and it's like I'll make another one tomorrow. And things like that. But when I look back on like some of the work I've done, I'm like, I actually feel like I was probably more creative when I was younger, and I was like ready to take more risks and like reach out to like bigger people and things like that, and just like, do you want to do this crazy thing? And then people get together and do it, and then but you get really detached, especially if it's not you doing like the video.
Interesting. What about you?
For me, let's see. Wait, was the around what?
Just like I was just curious because we're talking about perfectionism, and then it's just like that idea changes with time. It's like obviously when you put out the product, it's one thing, and so then do you ever revisit your work or look back on something and then kind of think about where it's at or how you relate to it?
Yeah, like for me, I guess like especially with music, it's always been very emotional. Like the whole pursuit is kind of this impulse, and I guess like I'm kind of similar to Ariana in being in control of like the end-to-end process. Like I'm doing it mostly for myself. And like what I'm like, there's an impulse that I feel. There's this kind of like drive that's almost, it's like hard to even give it words, but it's like something that takes control of me and pushes me to go into a room and I guess like put my hands on the piano and then like play a bunch of different things, and then at a certain moment I might find myself getting closer to the thing that I was like in pursuit of or being pulled towards. Perfection's a hard word. Like it's never, I don't think I've ever like everything that I've ever put out, I find it very hard to listen back to.
Really?
Yeah, like incredibly hard.
Is it because of the emotion or like the, I don't know, the format?
I guess it feels incomplete. And I think this is where I can relate to like, like your experience like quite deeply. Like I'm in pursuit of something. I hope that one day I might get close to there. But so far I haven't.
Yeah.
And there have been days where I feel like I'm closer to it. And that feels really good. And maybe tomorrow, like, I'll get
Maybe
closer to
tomorrow
it.
will be the day.
Yeah, that's kind of like, I'm perpetually in that place. Yeah.
Maybe it's a good thing that we never get there.
Fair. Yeah, fair. Yeah.
I want to read a quote. This is from a book that Martin gave me called Art Can Help. And this is quoting Wendell Berry. And, okay, this is the quote. "The best art involves a complex giving of honor. It gives honor to the materials that are being used in the work, therefore giving honor to God. It gives honor to the people for whom the art is made, and it gives honor to the maker, the responsible worker. In that desire to give honor, the artist takes on the obligation to be responsibly connected both to the human community and to nature." I feel like part of that, like, I feel like part of the perfectionism, like for me, I feel like my purpose in life is like to worship. It's like to like secularly, quasi-secularly, like worship, like give honor. Like whatever it is, I'm just like, and I just want to be in a state where I can just like honor all the time the things that I think are beautiful. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe part of the perfectionism is like this intense desire to give honor and like an intense recognition of just how insanely beautiful so many things are. And not so much, and like the idea that like creating anything is like creating like a token at the altar of the divine, you know, and being like, I want this to be the best possible thing to give to like this.
I wonder if it's worth like reframing the idea of perfectionism and like letting go of that with all of its baggage and thinking about more, is it right for the thing? Because giving honor in the way that you're speaking, I think, like, can you give honor perfectly? Maybe not. Can you give it right in the moment for a particular set of conditions? I think so. But to read what you're talking about of like the impulse to find a thing, you know, you're not finding the perfect note, but the right note. I think like the letting go of attachments, letting go of that, you can talk to like of the rightness of a feeling, and then whether that's perfect or not doesn't matter anymore. And then that will allow the rest of it to like keep moving in a way that still feels like you're doing justice to the motive force if it's
your own impulse, or if it's something that you're searching for somewhere else out in the world. Like, I think you even mentioned in something you said, like, was that the right solution? Maybe not. Maybe it is. And like, was it either of those perfect? No. What is perfect anyway? And I think that I feel like that gives us more freedom to operate in a way that feels with
Truthful.
less, truthful and less pressure, and there's practice involved in that, right? And finding, like, understanding what it is to find the right thing requires like a continual returning to it. And then, you know, you might find later that it was right for a feeling that you had years ago and not right for the feeling you have now, but it was right then and therefore is still valid in the way that it was created, in the place that it was created from.
Also,
Can we say Danielle?
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
the-
Point to Danielle.
Thanks.
My back corner over here. I've been just listening. There's so much to respond to, but I definitely feel, at least for me, most recently, I have felt like there's so much freedom. I love that you said that word freedom. I've been thinking about freedom this entire conversation in like letting go of perfectionism. Like the second you let go of that this thing has to be this, there's so much freedom in the possibilities of what you can create. And then you end up creating something that maybe you didn't plan to.
Yeah.
And maybe you actually like, maybe you don't really like it, but then somebody sees a whole world in it. And they see something that like, I didn't see that and I don't see that, but great that you do, you know? So then you're also creating beyond the bounds of like, what am I trying to contribute, or what am I trying to create that other people are going to like and respond to and give money for and actually, you know, uphold you as a lifestyle. But also like, what can you just create that is free for you, that feels right, and then like put that into the world, and then maybe something swims and then maybe something sinks, but you also learn about beyond the boundary of the audience you're looking for. Like it just opens it up in like such a wide and expansive way that the perfectionism like doesn't even seem fun anymore.
Yep.
So I wanted to piggyback onto what you said too. For me, there's this idea of separating myself from my ego brain, and instead of being the musician, being the instrument, and that's kind of an exploration into the unknown. And when you go out into the unknown without that perfectionist, without that preconceived notion, and you allow the divine or nature or whatever it is that's your muse to kind of come in and speak to you. I find when that happens, the best stuff happens. I can also function from my brain. I'm a reasonably intelligent person. I can do stuff strictly from my brain. But when I'm tapped into something that's beyond me and it's flowing and informing me and I'm going, ah yes, that's when I feel like, if you want to call it perfection, fine. I don't call it perfection, I just call it connectedness. And if that connectedness can be expressed in a way that you would feel it, or experience it, then I feel that's success. If money comes from that, you know, that's even better, but that's the first objective for me.
So I kind of feel like it's kind of like ripe to wrap up. Is there anything else that you guys are just like dying to say?
In the music world, like, I make music, and I love when things are not perfect, when I hear recordings and there's lots of imperfection in it. I think that's like the best. Like if you listen back to a lot of like Beatles recordings and stuff, they're actually pretty bad. I mean, I love the Beatles, but the actual recordings are not perfect at all. Like in some of them, you can hear like headphone bleeding if you like turn the speaker, if you pan everything right or pan everything left, you can hear like some bleed. They're technically not perfect in any way, but they're great, and people love them. And I always think that about music as well. I just love when I hear like a human touch, like a scratch on a fretboard, or like just something, a little tiny mistake. And I've sort of, when I put out music, I've sort of given up on the idea of perfection. I just get to a sort of stage where I'm kind of just sick of it, or I'm sort of roughly happy. And I know that my, whatever this vision of perfection is going to change anyway. It's like what you were saying about not being able to listen back. And like so many like of the greatest albums in the world, like the creators will sort of go, I don't even like it anymore, I can't listen to it. I would have changed it so many times. So I think you just gotta accept that perfection is kind of unattainable in many ways.
Well, I mean, also, you know, this question of technical perfection versus inspired human work. I'd rather have the latter than the former.
Definitely.
And you know, I think we all kind of feel that way, and that's what you're talking about. And in this digital world, you know, everybody's seeking this absolute perfection about everything, and so I think what's going to happen is there's, you know, more creatives are going to move in the opposite direction, and they're going to look for imperfection. They're going to look for anything that signals real human life. Because I'm not perfect. I've got a lot of fucked up things, you know, and maybe those things are actually beautiful. And those things are things that maybe a lot of other fucked up people can relate to. I want people to be able to relate to the human being versus some technicality.
Exactly, yeah.
So I was thinking of ending with a poem. Not something that I wrote, but are you guys down to hear a poem?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I have to find it now. But this is a poem that has kind of equal parts inspired and haunted me. And it's somewhat related. Okay. What kind of beast would turn... Oh, this is Adrian Rich, by the way. If anyone doesn't know Adrian Rich, oh my god. Okay. Woo! What kind of beast would turn its life into words? What atonement is this all about? And yet, writing words like these, I'm also living. Is all this close to the Wolverine's howled signals, that modulated cantata of the wild? Or when away from you, I try to create you in words. Am I simply using you like a river or a war? And how have I used rivers? How have I used wars? To escape writing of the worst thing of all. Not the crimes of others, not even our own death, but the failure to want our freedom passionately enough, so that blighted elms, sick rivers, and massacres would seem mere emblems of that desecration of ourselves. That's all I got.
Ariana, thank you so much.
Everyone's so like brilliant and creative. Thank you for sharing. I love listening to everybody. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. There's still wine.
There's still a lot of wine.
There's still more wine. That's not even there. I'm just saying.
Stuff's like, no, it's not.
Anybody who's not driving, take more wine.
So there's another one of these on Sunday. Come, it'll be a different topic. These same people. There's a suggestion box. Why not? And Clayton's leaving. Bye. And yeah, talk to each other. Hang out.